Marks that day of devastation and destruction. And on this special edition of Weather Center, we take you there to Oklahoma City and Mike Seidel at the University of Oklahoma, remembering May 3rd, 1 year later.
And Janetta, this afternoon we've moved from the Moore Emergency Management Center over here to Oklahoma University of Oklahoma's Mesonet Operations Office. Now, Mesonet is a fairly new concept. We'll get to a little bit more about that coming up. But here in the Mesonet office today, it's relatively quiet, but still manning the computers and the screens, letting people know and keeping an idea of what's going on. And all the action today has been off in Texas and down through the lower Mississippi Valley. You know, a year ago today, the numerical models, the models we use to predict the weather, still were not predicting thunderstorms for Oklahoma City, believe it or not. At noon Central Time, 1 year ago today, there was a storm across the Colorado-Wyoming border and a cold front across the Rockies moving east. The dry line at that time was in western Oklahoma. There was also a moist southerly flow coming out of Oklahoma across the plains, coming out of the Gulf across Oklahoma City. Temperatures were still in the mid-70s. Dew point temperatures measuring the moisture at the surface were juicy, holding around 66 degrees in the mid-60s, and that wind was out of the south and southwest at times, gusting up to 30 miles an hour. So an increasingly ripe environment for severe weather. And as we well know, later that afternoon, a catastrophic outbreak of tornadoes hit central Oklahoma, especially the metro Oklahoma City area. And residents here got their warnings from the usual locations: radio, television, of course, the Weather Channel giving the watches and the tornado and severe thunderstorm warnings. But there was a new guy on the scene, which helped the residents here locally get warned.
A little bit later in the day.
More emergency manager Galen Kitch looks at a special website, OK-First. This site helped him keep an eye on the May 3rd tornadoes.
This is about 20 after 6. The storm had tracked almost an hour at this point. And what we're watching as it tracks, which way it's moving.
OK-First is only part of a larger information gathering system known as Mesonet. There are 114 Mesonet sites in remote locations around Oklahoma. Each automated station collects observations every 5 minutes on temperature, humidity, winds, pressure, and rainfall. This information is downloaded to a central location at the University of Oklahoma, then goes via the internet to local emergency managers.
Our emergency managers know how to recognize the dry line in the Mesonet data. They know how to recognize a hook echo in the radar data.
The Mesonet and OK-First are unique to Oklahoma. Emergency managers can now get life-saving information at a touch of a button.
Traditionally, the public safety official has been in an information desert. They knew something was severe, but they didn't know where it was. OK-First comes in and gives them an information base upon which to digest and use better broadcast decisions and weather service decisions.
Oklahoma's 77 counties each have a Mesonet site. The data is not just used by emergency managers, but also by the local media and many area schools. And we're back here live at the Mesonet office at the University of Oklahoma, and I'm joined by Dale Morris, who actually is one of the gurus up here and trains students on how to read the radars and gather the information and get the information out to the various public utilities, the media outlets, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. We train emergency managers, students, teachers, just a whole variety of people on how to use the Mesonet data and radar data in their operations. They had, on May 3rd, for example, they used the information to close streets and direct ambulances around the tornadoes and things like that. After they were responding to the first tornado, multiple tornadoes went through, and so it saved lives that day.
That's great. Dale, what are we looking at today? I know it's very quiet here in Oklahoma City, but we still have that storm spinning array across Texas and Oklahoma in the upper levels.
Well, this upper level storm has spawned a few showers in southern Oklahoma and in northern Texas today, and the Mesonet is showing with our high resolution network over here the temperatures today that are cooler in the southern Oklahoma area where there's higher cloud cover and warmer further away from the actual center of the low in northern Oklahoma. So these high detail observations are very instrumental in giving us the best storm environments on a stormy day.
Something very detailed and certainly very useful in getting the word out to the public and getting more information. The more information, the better, of course.
Exactly.
We'd like to be able to send weather balloons at every street corner, but we can't do that at this point. Dale Morris, thanks for joining us here from the Mesonet office at the University of Oklahoma. Janetta?
All right, thanks so much, Mike Seidel, reporting live from Oklahoma City.
Kristen?
That's right. As you mentioned, I am at KWTV, the CBS affiliate here in Oklahoma City. And here on the helipad is where their storm chase began. And notice the sign here says, danger area, do not enter. Well, for helicopter pilot Leroy Tatum, his danger didn't stop here with this sign, but actually increased as he chased this tornado for more than 3 hours. We'll get to his story in just a moment. But first, we want to take a look at what was happening at this hour 1 year ago today. And we're going to do that by taking a look first at our water vapor imagery loop. And looking at the water vapor, you can see a line of upper level moisture indicated by the bright white coloration. This is actually a satellite signature of the upper level disturbance that will trigger the severe weather outbreak later on this evening. Now, here are the current conditions from last year with partly cloudy skies, 77 degrees, a dew point of 66, and winds out of the south at 24 miles an hour. Now, Leroy just came back from an assignment here at Channel 9, and this is the same helicopter that he used last year to chase the killer tornado. Now, notice just underneath the very front of the helicopter, the white bubble there. That is actually a camera that is mounted underneath the helicopter, and that's what he used along with a photographer to capture live pictures as this tornado continued to grow and continued to sweep across Oklahoma City. Now, most of us will never get close to a tornado, but for Leroy Tatum, he not only got close, he almost got too close. Now, he wasn't looking at this from his backyard, but from the helicopter seat as a pilot here for Channel 9. We want to take a look at his story as he chased that tornado. For 12 years, Leroy Tatum has been flying, chasing, and taping tornadoes for KWTV. He's seen big ones, but never one like what plowed through May 3rd, 1999.
It was just huge. It was a monster.
During the early afternoon, Leroy found this tornado, a small F1. At first, he thought his day was done.
But then they said the storm was continuing to build and getting bigger, and they asked us just to go ahead and keep following along.
And as they did, the tiny twister grew into an F5, and Leroy was flying right into the heart of it.
We can fly so as not to get sucked into it, and you can feel it if you do get too close.
Leroy avoids being backsided by other tornadoes by keeping in constant communication with Chief Meteorologist Gary England, but he has had some scary moments.
We hit a downdraft where we lost, probably 300 feet, pretty short amount of time, and it took a lot of power and turning away from where we were to get out of the downdraft.
When you first came upon the damage, what ran through your mind?
We moved into the damage path and just looked down and saw concrete slabs where houses used to be, and they were just completely clean. We'd look up and we could see just a red furrow along the ground, a quarter-mile wide, where the tornado had traveled, and that was just overwhelming.
Just absolutely hard to believe. It was also overwhelming for him. Imagine having to go to work to cover a tornado when most people are running home to make sure their loved ones are okay. Of course, his family is here, and that was constantly in the back of his mind, making sure that they were safe while he was actually getting very close to this killer tornado. And he says despite the danger, he actually would rather chase the tornado from the air than on the ground. He feels that he has a little bit more control of his destiny. Now, Leroy was not the only one who was chasing the killer tornado last year.
That is absolutely awesome.
The KWTV Storm Chasers hunted down the killer tornado on the road, and they risked their lives to save the lives of others in the path of this storm. Now, coming up, we'll relive the terror and the awe of tracking the tornado. We're going to talk to a professional storm tracker, a meteorologist here at KWTV, and bring you his exclusive video. Now back to you, Rich.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Again, we'll look forward to that report later today. Stay tuned to the Weather Channel.
That's right, Jeff. Now, most meteorologists have an opportunity to look at storms and tornadoes with that, a Doppler radar. But for meteorologist Val Castor, that just just wasn't good enough. He likes to hunt them down and stare them right in the eye, and that's what he did last year, and we'll tell you more about that coming up in just a moment. But first, we want to take a look at the current conditions, what was developing last year at this hour. Now, this is a visible satellite imagery from a year ago, and there's a gap in the cirrus clouds in northwest Texas. And though it wasn't even raining yet, this would be the likely place for any type of initial thunderstorm formation to take place. Now, while anything was possible, it was still too early to predict the massive tornado outbreak that would come. Now, for most of us, we run from a tornado, but for meteorologist Val Castor, he runs toward them. He is a professional storm chaser here at KWTV, and last year he spent 3 hours on the road hunting down the killer storm. Here's what he brought in exclusive video.
It's gotten a lot lower. Gary, we have a tornado on the ground, a brief touchdown.
The voice you hear is meteorologist Val Castor, broadcasting live for KWTV as he hunts down the killer tornado.
Oh, what an intense circulation, Gary.
For 3 hours, Castor tailed the twister, warning viewers of the danger and the damage inflicted.
Wow, that is absolutely awesome. This thing is throwing up debris all over the place. The shear has been overpowering for the updrafts.
This is Val Castor today, always looking for the next storm, yet always remembering May 3rd.
Well, you know, I really didn't think this was going to be a more active day until the point at which we saw our second tornado. When I saw that, I was just awestruck. That tornado was so big and so strong. I've never seen anything that strong before in all my years of chasing. You know, I can look up right here, look through the windshield, and I can see large pieces of debris, some of them being parts of roofs, cars, a mile up in the air above us.
One of the keys to the successful coverage of the storms right here, a camera where Val could send back still shots of the tornado to the station. Now they've taken it one step further with this, nicknamed the Val Cam. It's actually a microwave transmitter where Val can now send back live video pictures of a tornado. KWTV hopes this new technology will lead to earlier warnings and fewer deaths. As you can imagine, being a storm chaser can make you a little bit road weary, not only for Val, but also for actually his car and his truck. He actually put on 50,000 miles on his car last year, and most of that coming from just chasing storms. Now, Val is trained in this, and he knows when to seek safety, but what about your children? Well, in the Oklahoma City school system, hiding from tornadoes and a tornado drill is as common as reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Boys and girls, we need to take protection because of severe weather.
And coming up, a Tornado Drill 101 and how schools in the very heart of the Tornado Alley prepared for severe weather. And also coming up a little bit later on today, the weather ingredients that came together to produce the powerful F5 that ripped through areas of Oklahoma. That's coming up today at 4:30 Eastern Time. Now we want to take it back to Jeff Morrow in the studio. Jeff?
All right, thank you very much, Kristen. And Kristen will be with us, as well as other members of our live team there in Oklahoma City, as we look back at the terrible events, really, of last May 3rd.
Several tornadoes in Oklahoma and Kansas. One of the worst hit areas, Oklahoma City, where an F5 twister tore apart the area, killing dozens of people. The Weather Channel has several crews in that area commemorating that event. We begin with Nick Walker. He's standing by in Highland Park, Oklahoma. Nick?
This is the Highland Park neighborhood. As I mentioned, about 100 homes were just destroyed. Amazingly and almost miraculously, not one fatality occurred. It's taken the neighborhood a long time to recover, and only now are the homes being rebuilt and people beginning to move back in. Where I'm standing right now is a vacant lot, but it's where a home once stood. The foundation even now has been dug up. Right back here, a daycare center. It did not survive the tornado. We can only imagine the tragedy that we would have occurred as the tornado ripped through here. Fortunately, it came in the evening rather than in the afternoon when it was full of children. Back here behind me, we also have this large church. It became the command center across the street here for police, fire crews, emergency crews. They all used it to coordinate their efforts. Well, of course, we've been monitoring the conditions throughout the afternoon on that day of May 3rd, and it was here in the middle of the afternoon where things were beginning to heat up a bit, although vertical wind shear was still marginal for tornadoes, and the cap was becoming weak or non-existent.
Well, we were concerned really after 2 o'clock. The forecasting dilemma on this day was we had a tremendous amount of energy, and we did expect the wind shear to increase towards late afternoon. The trouble was the vertical motion was rather weak. In other words, there was nothing really to focus the storms in any one particular area.
Of course, forecasters, meteorologists here locally, this is an event they will never forget, nor will the people here in Moore, Oklahoma, and throughout the Oklahoma City area, especially the staff and the students of one particular Oklahoma school. This tornado plowed through Country Place subdivision, then crossed Highway 37, barely missing Eastlake Elementary School. Fortunately, the teachers and students had already gone for the day.
As soon as we got home, it was coming, and so we had to get in the bathtub, and I have a dog, and she got in there too with us. My mom was going to go to our ball game, but something was telling her not to go, and so she stayed home. And then when the tornado came, we stayed there, and we stayed there for like the whole night.
The students live behind the school in Eastlake subdivision, an area devastated by the storm.
I can't believe that the tornado was right in front of my house and my room was not damaged. You should have seen my brother Cooper's room. His room was like destroyed.
The children are not the only ones who vividly remember that night.
Whole rows and rows of houses was just rubble. Well, my greatest fear walking out of that rubble that night was how many funerals will I have to attend? And I didn't have to attend one.
Miraculously, not one of the 500 students or faculty of the school was seriously injured. But May 3rd, 1999 is a day they will never, ever forget. Nor will anyone at University of Oklahoma in Norman. That's where our own Mike Seidel is right now. Mike.
Nick, right now we're on the 10th floor of the Energy Building at the University of Oklahoma, as you mentioned. This is the Mesonet Operations Center. This is where they gather weather information from every nook and cranny across the state of Oklahoma, and it all comes in here. It's compiled and then made available to Mesonet subscribers on the internet. Very busy place, obviously, a year ago today. Now, coming up next half hour, we're going to join the Dow, the Doppler on wheels. These are storm chasers. These are professional storm chasers as they tracked that F5 tornado and its path of death and destruction. They clocked the twister's winds as the fastest and most violent on record. That story's coming up in about a half an hour. And a treat for you right now, if you're near the internet, near the old computer, you can go into weather.com, log in, get into our weather.com chat room, and look for Tornado Alley. In that chat room right now, we have PhD student Paul Markowski from the University of Oklahoma, and he can answer a lot of questions you may have about tornadoes and severe weather. We'll see you back in about a half an hour with Doppler on wheels. Janetta?
All right, thank you so much, Mike Seidel, reporting live from Norman, Oklahoma. Area commemorating the event. We begin with Mike Seidel. He's standing by at the University of Oklahoma. Mike?
And good afternoon, Janetta. A nice day here in Oklahoma City, a far cry from what was getting set to take place virtually 1 year ago today, late this afternoon. A year ago today, it was lights out, severe weather, tornadic storms, and an F5 tornado roared through this part of Oklahoma and through metro Oklahoma City. Behind me, you can see Dow. This is Doppler on wheels, and this is certainly one of the main components of research out on the field. The students and professors from the university use this to go out and track tornadoes, and they get pretty close. In fact, they were pretty close over the weekend to some of those tornadoes you may have heard about that did some damage in the counties along the Red River, just south of the Red River in northern Texas. Let's take a look back at 1 year ago, this moment, 2:30 Central Time, and so far there was no precipitation on the radar, believe it or not. Still no precipitation, at least in the Oklahoma City area, but the upper air disturbance that we talked about earlier was moving eastward. You can see that on the water vapor as the easternmost areas of blue. there on the bottom left of your screen. Now, as it moves eastward, it's bringing higher humidities and wind speeds to the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. Now, it's this disturbance up there at the jet stream level that will eventually trigger the severe weather. And the current weather, 2:30 Central Time, May 3rd, 1999. Temperature has risen 3 degrees, up 3 degrees from an hour and a half ago to 80. The dew point hanging tough at 66, so it's a very warm, humid air mass, and winds are from the south at 24, gusting to 30 miles an hour. Now, many people in the Oklahoma City area had to encounter at least a brush or were hit directly by that F5 tornado, not because they wanted to. However, researchers, professors, and even students here at the University of Oklahoma, the Dow, the Doppler on Wheels folks, were out chasing this tornado, and for some very tense moments throughout the afternoon and evening, they were right by and right close up to it. By early afternoon, 2 Doppler on Wheels research trucks were in southwest Oklahoma, close to the town of Chickasha.
Okay, we just turned north on 81. There's the storm. Tornado is probably 18 kilometers to our north.
They followed this supercell as it tracked to the north and west. During the chase, the storm turned deadly.
Away from us. This is the biggest storm I've ever seen. Our radar indicates F3 at least. We got
incoming debris. Incoming debris is flying all over.
Debris. Slow down, slow down.
Okay, we're really close.
I'd say, okay. Yeah, why don't we stop here? We're ready to back up and get the hell out of the way if we have to. Damn, that's a monster. It's took me through the metro area. Yeah, I know.
We were chasing the tornadoes back up towards Oklahoma City and towards the Norman area. And of course, that's where I live. That's where my family and small baby are. And so that was a very different feeling. I was trying to raise my wife on the cell phone and warn her of the situation and could not get through. So it was personally very harrowing for me to be intercepting a storm, but at the same time not know and not be able to give advice to my family of how to seek shelter.
Yeah, a little bit. Keep going.
Okay.
It's not going to cross the road, is it?
It's going to.
I don't think so.
You sure?
And joining us now live at the University of Oklahoma is one of the meteorology professors, Howie Bluestein. Howie is certainly an eminent forecaster and certainly knows more about tornadoes than most of us. Thanks for joining us. Now, you were out looking at that F5 back a year ago today and did a lot of research following the touchdown and the destruction. What did you find?
Well, we looked at the tornado about an hour before it hit Oklahoma City, and we saw that the tornado looked just like a hurricane. It had an eye with little waves inside the eye and spiral bands going outside. It was rather incredible looking.
And the speeds were clocked up to 318 miles an hour. It's pretty incredible.
Yes, the tornadoes don't come any more powerful than that.
And as far as this season's gone so far, it seems to the general observer, the casual observer, it's been rather quiet, at least based on just the number of tornadoes.
Yes, it has been relatively quiet, and I think for the next week or so it's going to continue to be very quiet as we're in a blocking pattern right now.
That's good news for the folks here in Oklahoma City. Professor Howie Bluestein, thanks for joining us from the University of Oklahoma. Now, if you want to talk to Professor Bluestein, you can't talk to him, but you can chat with him at weather.com. And about next 5 or 10 minutes, he'll be online for the next 45 minutes. Go into weather.com, into the chat room, into Tornado Alley, and he'll be there to answer your questions about tornadoes and severe weather. This guy knows about as much as anybody else. And next half hour, you can join us for the conclusion of that day's chase as we join the men and women of Doppler on Wheels. Janetta?
All right, sounds exciting. Thanks so much. Mike Seidel reporting live from Norman, Oklahoma.
Area commemorating the event. We begin with Mike Seidel. He's standing by at the University of Oklahoma. Mike?
And Rich, this afternoon, a far cry from the way the weather was 1 year ago today. We've got sunshine, a few puffy cumulus clouds, but no storms on radar. Let's take a look back at what was going on about a year ago at this time. In fact, forecasters were checking out the satellite photo and noticing a clear spot over Texas. In other words, there had been a hole in the cirrus clouds in the northwest corner of Texas, as we just circled there. Now, by 3 Central Time, some convective clouds had formed in that spot, which led to a short-lived thunderstorm southwest of Childress, Texas. At the same time, the vertical wind shear had increased, but it was still not extremely strong. The skies were partly cloudy at 3 o'clock Central. Temperatures at 80, dew points in the mid-60s, the winds from the south gusting to 32 miles an hour. Now, that was mid-afternoon. Several hours later at 7, the situation became very tense in this area. The Doppler on Wheels folks, the researchers here from the University of Oklahoma, were out tracking the F5 tornado, and at one point were less than a mile from it. Just after 7, the Doppler on wheels trucks were extremely close to the tornado.
Got debris falling.
Okay, slow down, slow down.
This is where we make it a flat. Yeah, boy, that thing's still rotating big time.
Yeah, excellent.
Looks like it may be over the road. Look at the tornado.
Man, now it's visible. 1.4 kilometers ahead of us. Be careful here. If you feel like it's coming towards us or doing anything stupid, stop and do a U-turn.
And we followed it up to 37, and that was at the point where it went from being fun and exciting to being sobering, realizing that people were going to die, people's homes were going to be destroyed. So that was when the whole kind of the theme of the chase changed.
The tornado was just minutes in front of them.
We have power lines kind of hanging.
We're in the damage path right now.
Look at the houses.
Yeah,
all the roofs are stripped.
It was heading towards neighborhoods we knew, we drove through. We knew people who lived in those neighborhoods. And as parts of those neighborhoods rained down on us, it was, I think, quite disturbing for some of us.
The chase took them through more, then north and east of Oklahoma City. By 8, they were close to I-40 as the 90-minute destructive tornado dissipated.
That's all that's left of it.
And we're back here at the University of Oklahoma with Professor Josh Werman, who was out that day, and he is the guy in charge of Doppler on wheels. We've got one of the Dow units here, but you chase with 2. Why is that?
We try to triangulate on the tornado, and we can measure both wind speed and wind direction. And all the physics of how the storm forms involves vector winds, so we need to look from 2 different directions.
Now, last year you were the group of scientists who measured that wind, clocked it over 300 miles an hour. It's pretty impressive.
Yes, that's an extremely high wind speed. We measured that over the Bridge Creek area, which experienced F5 damage, and it was just an alarmingly strong tornado.
And what are you still doing with the data? I know you've looked at it a lot over the past 12 months. Are you still looking at that?
We're still examining that data and probably will for another year. We're focusing on 2 main things. One is the genesis process of the tornadoes, and also on multiple vortex structure that we observed in a huge tornado that occurred in northern Oklahoma that same day.
And you hope to be chasing maybe a little bit later in the weekend?
Possibly. We've already been out once and intercepted 4 tornadoes on Sunday, and we may be going out again on Saturday.
Okay, Professor Josh Werman, thanks for joining us. A busy guy during tornado season, and you can chat with Professor Werman tonight on weather.com between 8:30 and 9 Eastern Time. Now let's go over to where all the action is on a busy day, where they put out the watches and warnings. The Weather Channel's Jim Cantori is at the Storm Prediction Center. Jim?
Thank you, Michael. As a matter of fact, we do have a weather watch out today across northeast Texas and on into eastern Oklahoma and eastern Arkansas as well for some thunderstorms, but obviously nothing like we had just a year ago when that vicious tornado outbreak occurred across Oklahoma. As a matter of fact, just off to my right here, this gentleman was just about to put out what they call an MCD, a mesoscale convective discussion describing the situation becoming volatile in southwestern Oklahoma. That was just about to go out, very, very close to the correlation on the satellite picture that Mike showed as well. Well, coming up next, we will talk about all these ingredients that had to come together to produce this incredible F5 tornado, which caused so much damage and destruction. That's coming up next, so stay with us. Rich, back to you.
All right, thank you, Jim, for that report. We'll look forward to that a little bit later today.
Okay, buddy.
Where an F5 twister tore apart the area, killing dozens of people. The Weather Channel has several crews in that area commemorating the event. And we begin with Jim Cantori. He's standing by at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Jim?
And Jeff, just last hour we talked about the little puff or little shower that developed down around Childress, Texas. That had died out, but all of a sudden at this time a second puff in the clouds, a second shower developed down near Lawton, Oklahoma, and that was the one that really took off. So the situation was getting worse, and as a matter of fact, from a Storm Prediction Center standpoint, which is where we are, the situation was going to go from moderate to high risk.
And so here I am scrambling to get this high risk out by 3:30, 3:45, when shift change is going out. What I decided to do is I called the Norman office and the Wichita office and told them, I said, guys, I think I'm going to upgrade to high risk. And we talked about it, we all agreed, and we went with it, and so the outlook went out as high risk.
And as defined, a high risk means, this is what the criteria they use to put out high risk, at least 20 tornadoes and 2 of them being F3 of F5 intensity or extreme derecho, producing widespread significant wind damage. And that's a line of very, very strong winds, and they expect at least 50 plus or minus reports. So you have to have incredible confidence to say that, hey, at least 2 of those are going to be F3 to F5, and therefore a high risk of thunderstorms was issued. Well, folks, again, it isn't just looking at a satellite and looking at a radar. There's a lot of different ingredients that have to come together in the atmosphere to produce this kind of an outbreak. Let's take a look at some of those key elements. Warm, moist air, wind, and a trigger are all necessary for severe weather to develop. And on May 3rd, 1999, the elements converged over the southern plains to form a series of severe storms, one of which spawned the deadly Oklahoma City tornado. But it wasn't as simple as that. Early in the day, there was plenty of warm, moist air to fuel potential thunderstorms, but the air couldn't rise and form thunderclouds because of something called a cap, a layer of warm air at around 6,000 feet. Something had to break that cap.
That happened later in the day as an upper air trough pushed into the area, and divergence aloft allowed and actually helped pull up air from below.
Still, it was hours before wind shear developed. Wind shear is a strong change in wind direction that helped move the cap out of the way. It helped trigger the supercell thunderstorms that day. The intense instability and strong vertical wind shear increased the chance of tornadoes, especially the violent F4 and F5 tornadoes. And everything came together, a total of 78 tornadoes from May 3rd to 4th. One garnered most of the attention.
This is the hook echo indicating the supercell thunderstorm that produced the F5 tornado that hit Oklahoma City. The tornado's in that little red ball at the southwest edge of the echo.
That was just one of 8 supercell thunderstorms that produced most of the tornadoes in Oklahoma and Kansas on May 3rd. And to recap for you, the Fujita scale, F1, 73 to 112 mile per hour winds, F2, 113 to 157, F3, 158 to 206, F4, 207 to 260 mile per hours, and F5, there you see it in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Those are winds of 261 to 318 miles an hour. Obviously intense, severe, unimaginable type damage. Well, folks, again, we invite you to join us tonight online for NWS forecaster Dan Miller, who will be on with us at weather.com at 5 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about his memories of the May 3rd outbreak. Well, again, it's not just putting out a forecast, whether it be high risk or putting out a tornado watch. It's also affecting people's lives here, and they're still being affected. Let's go talk to Nick Walker, who's in the Highland Park subdivision, with a live report. Nick?
That is so true, Jim. So many people's lives affected here in the Highland Park neighborhood. On this day, on May 3rd, 1 year ago, estimated 100 homes or so just demolished, destroyed as that tornado ripped through the area. But amazingly enough, not one single fatality in this neighborhood. Of course, we'll be having live reports. We'll have several reports throughout the evening hours from the Highland Park neighborhood here. Also ahead, some people believe that overpasses are havens during tornadoes. The May 3rd tornado shattered that myth, proving the very opposite, that overpasses are among the worst places to take shelter under. How overpasses proved to be deadly shelters on May 3rd, that coming up. By the way, it was just about this time, just a few minutes from now 1 year ago, that the first watches and warnings began to be issued. Coming up just a little bit later, we'll have some words about what the current conditions, the weather conditions were at that particular time when those warnings were issued. That's still ahead. Right now, let's head back to the studio with Jeff Morrow. Jeff?
All right, thank you very much, Nick and Jim. And again, they're part of a 5-person live team in Oklahoma City today to report on what happened just 1 year ago today.
The path of that deadly tornado as it ripped through the city. You can see this large church building behind me. Now, I'm told that right after the tornado hit, all along the walls of the church there, you could see timbers just sticking out of the walls. Of course, repairs have been made to the church. Incidentally, the church was the command center for police officials, fire crews, and emergency crews as well to keep control of the situation in the aftermath of that big storm. Now, at about 10 to 4 Central Time, there was a move to upgrade the risk of severe thunderstorms from moderate to high, and soon after that, a severe thunderstorm warnings was quick on its heels. That first warning went out for Comanche County. That was at about 4:15 Central Time, and at that time, forecasters were considering the first tornado watch.
When the storms really started to develop rapidly between 4 and 4:30, and we saw the next satellite picture around 4:15 or so. That's when the next lead forecaster that came in really started to get concerned and said, well, maybe we do need to issue a watch.
Now, just behind me, you can see this road that leads down to Interstate 35. There are several overpasses along Interstate 35, and it was in those overpasses that a lot of people sought shelter from the tornado. Many people sometimes think that that's a good idea, but is it a safe option? On May 3rd, 2 people actually died and many more were injured when they decided to use an overpass as a safe haven.
Hang on to the girders.
We've all seen video of people escaping a tornado's wrath by sheltering underneath an overpass. But on May 3rd, overpasses were a dangerous place to be. At this one on I-35 and more, 1 person was killed and many more were injured when they sought refuge from an F5 tornado.
There's no protection here from any effects of wind, and as you can see, there's nothing to hold on to, so you're just the same as being out in the open. You do have some protection from hail that may be falling, but in a tornado where you have winds that are blowing at maybe 150 to 200 miles an hour in a circular motion, there's absolutely no shelter under here from that or from the missiles that are being driven in that wind.
The violent and destructive winds are not the only cause for concern. I-35 at Shields Boulevard became a nightmare. People crammed underneath the structure, leaving their cars abandoned on the highway. Traffic gridlock.
The people that stopped their cars in the middle of the interstate and blocked the road to take shelter themselves under the bridge jeopardized the lives of everybody else that was on that interstate. They had left them with absolutely nowhere else to go.
So where do you go if an overpass is not an option? Should you stay in your car or hide in a ditch?
I'm not quite sure that it's clear if any one of those 3 options is necessarily any better than the other one. The main thing to remember is that if you're in the path of a tornado, especially a strong or a violent one, there is no guaranteed safe place if you're in the path.
The best advice, try and avoid putting yourself at risk in the first place. Pay attention to what's happening around you. Well, it's some good advice, and hopefully advice that will be heeded the next time when and if a tornado should strike. You know, we're told that one thing that's interesting about this whole thing is that the people who were living in the path of the tornado actually got their first information about it from television.
That is absolutely awesome.
KWTV Storm Chasers hunted down the killer tornado. They risked their lives to save the lives of others in the path of the storm. Coming up, reliving the terror and the awe of tracking the tornado through the camera lens. Of course, 911 workers were deluged with emergency calls the night of May 3rd.
911, what's your emergency? I'm on computer. There's a gas leak. People are really hurt, really bad. Is anybody trapped? I don't know. How many people do you think are hurt? There's over 100 people, I swear. These are people's homes. There's nothing.
Coming up a little bit later, the tapes, the 911 tapes that capture the mayhem of that evening of May 3rd. Also, we want to remind you that you can chat online with Dan Miller. He's with the local National Weather Service. He's online right now at weather.com. You can log on and chat with him right now for the next 45 minutes. But right now, let's head back to the studio with Christina.
All right, Nick, thanks a lot for that report. Well, still ahead on this look back at May 3rd. Tonight at 7, we take a look behind the scenes here at the Weather Channel and what was happening that day. At 7:30, the harrowing calls made to the Moore, Oklahoma 911 Center. And at 8:30, a dramatic look at some storm chasers who came very close to the F5 tornado. But for now, we go to Bob for a look at what's going on in the East now.
Was very busy. Already reporters and photographers were fanning out all over south central Oklahoma to cover the inevitable damage and deaths in association with these storms. And inside, the forecasters were already beginning to give warnings and sound the alarm. And indeed, between 4 and 4:30 Central Time, we already had a severe thunderstorm warning. That was for Comanche County, and that was issued at 4:15. Now, the next step was a tornado watch, and that was issued for 4:45 Central Time.
We started getting calls that they had rotation. It was time to talk about issuing a tornado watch. And so then things started to move rapidly.
And not 2 minutes afterwards, after the first tornado watch was issued, a tornado warning came out. And the first tornado warning was issued for 447, and that was for Comanche, Grady, and also Caddo counties. So already at this hour, after a very quiet morning, things were beginning to develop quickly. And the folks here at KWTV were beginning to make their coverage and sound the alarm, as I mentioned, to all the viewers across south central Oklahoma. Now, many people had close encounters with the May 3rd tornadoes, but for meteorologist Val Castor and professional storm chaser, he actually gets paid to get close to the tornadoes. Now here's his exclusive look and his day, which was often traumatic.
It looks like to me, Gary, this thing is rapidly getting organized. The rotation has gotten much stronger. Gary, we have a tornado on the ground, a brief touchdown. Okay, Gary, the rotation, this thing's going to be a big one, I think. The tornado is approximately 3.5 miles west of Sorrel. The funnel goes all the way to the ground now. Major tornado. It's a very narrow funnel, but it's rotating very strongly, Gary. There goes, wow. That is absolutely awesome. This thing is throwing up debris all over the place. I don't see any structures right now in the direct path of it, but I wouldn't want to be in the path of it. Are you there? This thing is rapidly weakened. We still have just a very light circulation on the ground, but the funnel's completely gone. I think the tornado is roping out and it's just about dead. There it is, right over there. It's a wedge. It is a wedge. I see big pieces of debris flying through the air. Oh, this thing is large, Gary. It could be as wide as a mile. Oh, wow. It's a half a mile less right in front of us. It's leveled a house, a couple houses over here. No signs of lifting. This is definitely going to be a long track tornado. Now, KWTV has about 16 people who track the storms on a daily basis when needed, and Val is one of their senior storm trackers, and he is a meteorologist, and he uses extra caution when he goes on these assignments. He says it's not for the amateurs, to say the least. He's always in constant communication with the meteorologist here at the station so he can avoid being in any type of danger. Now, Val and the meteorologists here weren't the only ones keeping an eye on the May 3rd tornadoes, also the meteorologist at the Weather Channel. Coming up next, a behind-the-scenes look at how the May 3rd tornado outbreak unfolded in the Weather Channel studios, and it was a busy night, to say the least. Also coming up in the next hour, we invite you to chat online. This next hour, we have a tornado safe room expert. You can discuss how to help keep your home safe from tornadoes. That's online at weather.com. Now back to you in the studio.
All right, Kristen, thanks a lot for that report.
Time, the tornado outbreak was officially underway.
Well, we issued the first tornado watch at 4:30 for western and central Oklahoma, and the first tornado occurred a little before 5.
That's right, it was exactly 4:51 Central Time that the first tornado was spotted 7 miles east-northeast of Medicine Park in Comanche County. This was the first tornado produced by what was called Supercell A, which is the same supercell responsible for the F5 Oklahoma City tornado. The first tornado was an F0 with a path only a mile long. The second tornado from the supercell touched down about 5 till 5 near Elgin, also in Comanche County, and it was also an F0. Well, the May 3rd tornado outbreak not only impacted lives of its victims, but also of the people who were working the event. As a matter of fact, the Weather Channel studios were very busy that night, and we had a Weather Channel crew who was right in the middle of it. Here's our story.
This is no longer a potentially dangerous situation. This is a dangerous situation. Anyone in the vicinity of downtown Oklahoma City, you should be taking shelter immediately.
Severe weather specialist Dr. John Scala spent the afternoon of May 3rd monitoring the volatile weather situation in the southern plains.
As we got further into the afternoon and saw what the daytime heating was doing and the amount of instability, how the wind fields were changing, it became pretty obvious that we were going to have a significant event, and we just hoped that it didn't hit a major area.
Of course, we know it did.
As the severe weather event began to unfold, producers and meteorologists were busy getting the word out to the public.
Looks like we'll have to get that on the air right away.
Then the terrifying video started coming in. The video was shot by a Weather Channel crew who was witnessing the power of the tornado firsthand.
We just were on Highway 44 and we left. As we came around the corner, we saw a tornado about half a mile wide in front of us.
It was just an unbelievable sight to witness. And then later I looked at the video and it's like, wow. Because I don't think with the human eye, when I was there, I really realized how big and how catastrophic it was. And it wasn't until later that night and the next day that I realized that, wow, this is something that I'll probably never see again in my lifetime.
Whether covering the May 3rd tornado outbreak from the field or in the Weather Channel studios, it's a day not easily forgotten. And we'll continue our coverage here at the National Weather Service office in Norman, Oklahoma. But now let's go to the Storm Prediction Center with Jim Cantori. Jim?
And Kim, as was the case at the National Weather Service here at the Storm Prediction Center, things were hopping at this point in the night, no doubt about it, still having no idea the unbelievable damage that these tornadoes were going to cause. Well, I bring with me Dr. John Scala, our storm analyst from the Weather Channel. John, we just saw that piece about you pretty much racing around in unbelievable, almost disbelief as to what was going on there. We got a chance to take part in a tornado symposium over the last couple of days here. We went out and saw the damage. I mean, can you believe what we saw even a year later?
Jim, it was really sobering. It was one thing to be back at the Weather Channel in those confines and to be talking about an event of this magnitude, but to come out here, view it from the air, and then as you and I did from the ground, incredible. The perspective is totally different. It puts a totally different tinge on things.
And what we're looking at, John, is some pictures now of aerial. You also got a chance to see those pictures.
It just is beyond words. And as you and I did, we went out and looked at this a year later, and the magnitude of the event is still evident.
And one of the things that was very, very clear, one apartment complex, I remember just a pool and just concrete, and that was it.
What hit me, Jim, both that night a year ago and then as you and I looked at the damage, was lives were lost here, and that's a very sobering fact.
No doubt about it. Thank you very much, Dr. John Scala. Coming up, folks, a personal perspective on what the people that were working that night, the National Weather Service and the Storm Prediction Center, had with this particular storm. Back to you, Christina.
All right, Jim, thanks a lot for that report. Well, now we want to take a look at what's going on across the eastern states. For that, we go to Bob.
It is May 3rd, and that is a date that many people in the Oklahoma City area will never forget. 1 year ago today, several tornadoes roared across Oklahoma and Kansas. Oklahoma City got the worst of it. Many people were killed and entire neighborhoods were destroyed. We're bringing you special coverage of the May 3rd anniversary. This half hour will begin with Jim Cantori, who is live at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma.
And Terry, again, we are recapping the day for you, trying to bring you back to the exact time and what was going not only going on here, but also in the neighborhoods in surrounding Oklahoma City. And in the last half hour, 2 tornadoes had already touched down in Oklahoma, and by 20 to 6 Central Time, the National Weather Service has told people for the potential of a dangerous tornado to move into the metro area. Well, one of the 2 tornadoes that already hit, the first storm, spawned its 3rd tornado from the Oklahoma City supercell, and that touched down in 5:20 Central Time near Apache in Caddo County. The other touched down briefly near Cyril, also in Caddo County, at 5:26 p.m. Central Time. This is what the tornado that hit near Cyril, Oklahoma looked like. It was the 4th tornado of the Oklahoma City supercell. This is the same supercell that produced the huge F5 tornado that traveled from just south of Amber through Oklahoma City. And again, as we mentioned, folks, this is a tornado outbreak that occurred in the backyard of many National Weather Service employees and also Storm Prediction Center employees. As I said earlier in the tease, imagine if you were not only working but also thinking, obviously, about your family's safety. Well, we spoke to several of these folks to find out how they handled that incredible night.
It was a huge, wide tornado on the ground heading northeastward. And it's the type of thing you look at and say, well, this isn't heading toward me, is it? But in reality, it was.
Just knew it was a devastating tornado, and I was quite nervous. Actually, for a while, concerned for not only my family's safety, but everybody else that was in the path of this thing.
can't describe it. You see pictures of F4 and F5 damage, and sure, when you look at the pictures, you say, wow, that's impressive damage, nothing is left standing. But when you see it firsthand, and there are no words to describe what the view is.
I thought the tornado was out in open country. It turned out that there were homes in the path, and I was seeing the debris from those homes. And that was a very frightening and horrifying experience. I think that'll last with me a long time.
People who live through a tornado of this magnitude will never forget it. I mean, I know I'll never forget it, and I was 10 miles away from the tornado.
And I was working that night myself, and again, unbelievable how quickly the storms blew up and were rotating in a matter of minutes. Well, let's go to an area that was very much affected, the Highland Park neighborhood, where Nick Walker is standing by with a live report. Nick?
That's right, Jim. The Highland Park neighborhood here in Moore, Oklahoma, one of those hardest hit by the tornado. It's a neighborhood that is still in transition. It's been in transition for some time and no doubt will be for some time to come. There are some homes that have been rebuilt already. There are others, as this one behind me, that is still under construction. And then there are some vacant lots, several vacant lots. Nothing left behind, as you can see, where the residents have perhaps decided to move on, to not rebuild. What is evident about this, though, because of what is left behind, and even more so because what is not left behind, is this was one very powerful tornado. In fact, the University of Oklahoma's Doppler on wheels measured the tornado's wind speed, a wind speed that put the May 3rd tornado at the very top of the Fujita scale, an F5, wreaking catastrophic damage.
When we intercepted the tornado that went through Moore and southern Oklahoma City, we observed extremely high winds. The winds that we observed were over 300 miles an hour. At this point, we don't like to put an exact mile per hour to that. Our best guess at the time was approximately 318, but there's an uncertainty to that measurement. So it's really somewhere in the low 300s at this point.
The May 3rd tornado will leave its mark on history as one of the highest wind speeds ever recorded. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of folks are rebuilding their homes. They're doing so with what's called a safe room. It's actually a storm shelter, a concrete storm shelter within their homes. If you'd like, you can log on right now to weather.com, talk to a safe room expert. You can chat with him online. He'll be there for about 15, 20 more minutes. Jim Llewellyn, the safe room coordinator for Oklahoma City. Right now, we want to turn our attention to Kristen Dodd. She's live at KWTV television here in Oklahoma City. Kristen?
That's right, Nick. We have come inside the control room now where they have just finished up their 5 o'clock newscast. Of course, it's a much quieter night in this area over what we had last year at this time, when quick decisions and bold warnings help save hundreds of lives.
I said something I never said in my entire career, was that you're going to have to be below ground level to survive.
That's right. That's Chief Meteorologist Gary England, who worked round the clock bringing those much needed warnings to their viewers. Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to take you to the KWTV newsroom for a behind the scenes look at a very dramatic time on the May 3rd tornadoes. And this is some incredible information and stories told by people who not only covered the tornadoes, but actually were part of the story. That's coming up in the next half hour. Now let's head back to Terry Smith in the studio.
That was a year ago. Tonight, thunderstorms have your attention, and here's Paul with the latest. Paul, it is May 3rd, and that's a date many people in the Oklahoma City area will never forget. 1 year ago today, several tornadoes roared across Oklahoma and Kansas. Oklahoma City got the worst of it. Many people were killed and entire neighborhoods were destroyed. We're bringing you special coverage of the May 3rd anniversary. This half hour will begin with Kim Perez, who is live at the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma.
Well, Terry, 4 tornadoes actually occurred in Oklahoma between 5:30 and 6 Central Time. And it was about this time that forecasters began to realize this was not going to be a typical night.
I think we began realizing how serious the event was going to be basically when the tornado started getting about a mile wide down there near Chickasha. And that was really the first storm of the day, and it ended up being the most significant storm of the day.
The Oklahoma supercell spawned its 5th and 6th tornadoes. That 6th tornado touched down first in Caddo County near Cement as an F2, then entered Grady County at 5:52 Central Time, leaving a path 7 miles long at F3 intensity. This was the first tornado to hit Grady County. The tornado touched down in Chickasha at 6:12 Central Time. Well, how did the media, the local media, react to this situation? Well, let's join Kristen Dodd at KWTV in Oklahoma City for an update. Kristen.
Thanks a lot, Kim. I'm here at KWTV where they are right in the middle of their 6 o'clock newscast. But tonight's newscast is taking on a much different picture than what we had 1 year ago today, a much calmer newscast to say the least. Last year on May 3rd, the airwaves were filled with warnings from the meteorologists for people to take cover. And it's that bold decision and very quick thinking action that actually helped save hundreds of lives.
Car 21 in Chickasha confirms that tornado due west of Chickasha.
This is behind-the-scenes video of the KWTV weather office during the May 3rd tornadoes. The man in blue is meteorologist Gary England. He is surrounded by a whirlwind of assistants, producers, and managers, all fixed on feeding him information to pass along to viewers.
Debris cloud, there it is. Multiple vortex tornado on the ground.
It's pretty difficult to concentrate sometimes. It works, you know, it's organized chaos. Everyone knows their job, but on May 3rd, there was so much information.
Information coming in from news crews all over south central Oklahoma. The station helicopter feeds live pictures of the twister, while 16 storm trackers chase on the ground.
Gary, we can see another funnel, actually.
They constantly describe changing conditions for Gary, plus send still pictures via computer once tornadoes are spotted.
I have never seen anything like that in my life. It still gives me goosebumps to talk about it. It was the most god-awful thing I'd ever seen. You just knew people were going to die. It was obvious.
The tornadoes killed 44 people that day all across Oklahoma, but that number surely would have been higher if not for a very bold decision made here in the News 9 Weather Center.
Get below ground. You folks that pass this storm, get below ground immediately.
At that point, I think it was 5:57, and I said something I never said in my entire career, was that you're going to have to be below ground level to survive. And so I knew I had to say something to cause them to come to action.
And his action saved lives. That's right. Gary has heard from dozens of viewers saying that if he had not issued that warning to get below ground, they may have treated this tornado like the many tornadoes that they experience here in Oklahoma City and may not have taken such drastic action. But studies show that those who actually were in the core of the tornado and did not go below ground, well, those are the ones that were killed or critically hurt. Now, Gary stayed on the air for 6 hours straight, giving warnings. They had many tornadoes come on even after dark, and the station ran 24 hours of live coverage, and that definitely paid off in the fact that lives were saved. Well, that's one story told in pictures. There's another story that's told over the phone, and Mike Seidel is in the 911 center where they took some calls and more that definitely are eye-opening. Mike?
Kristen, tonight we're back in the Moore, Oklahoma 911 center just outside of Oklahoma City. This town was hit by that tornado 1 year ago this evening, and 1 year ago tonight the phones were literally ringing off the hook in this room.
911. Yes, we've got a bad injury on 205 Rosewood. Ma'am, what's wrong, honey? Someone is buried under the debris with broken legs and arms.
The tapes that reveal the chaos and drama of that night 1 year ago today will be coming up on our next edition as we look back at May 3rd. Remember, that'll be in about 30 minutes. Again, here tonight, it's much quieter, and that's the way the local officials like to see it. Just sunshine here in central Oklahoma. Terry?
All right, Mike. Well, that is a look at what's been going on this evening from Oklahoma. It's just an amazing day 1 year ago today in Oklahoma, so stay with us throughout the evening. Coming up at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, a fascinating glimpse at how local TV stations covered the storm. Then at 9 o'clock, we'll look and listen to what was going on with the first rescuers on the scene. Also, is there a safe hiding place if an F5 tornado is coming your way? The answer tonight at 9:30 Eastern. But right now, thunderstorms have our attention, and here's Paul with the latest. of the May 3rd anniversary. This half hour will begin with Nick Walker, who is live in the Highland Park neighborhood of Moore, Oklahoma. Nick.
Well, Terry, even looking at all the vacant lots that are left behind here after the damage from the tornado, it's almost inconceivable of what actually went on that night. There were about 100 homes standing, and then suddenly in an instant, not standing, just completely demolished by that tornado. Now, we want to keep you abreast of the current conditions as they were going on that night. Now, it was in the past half hour that the most powerful of the tornadoes was spawned, the Oklahoma City F5. In all, 4 tornadoes occurred in the last half hour. The 7th tornado of the Oklahoma City supercell touched down near Chickasha in Grady County at 6:07 Central Time. The 8th tornado of the same cell also touched down near Chickasha, this time at 6:12. It left a 4-mile F2 path. The big one, the Oklahoma City tornado, touched down at 6:23 near Amber in Grady County and left a 15-mile path in that county alone. It produced F5 damage there and killed 12 people. The first tornado warning for Cleveland and McLean counties was issued by the National Weather Service. That was at about 6:40. Now, with 4 tornadoes in one half hour, you can bet that the tornado chasers were out. But the tornado chasers that we're speaking of were not just there to get videotape. They were there to study the tornadoes. They were there to study them. They were there to collect data. We're talking about the storm chasers from the University of Oklahoma as they track the path of the May 3rd tornado. Their mobile radar, called Doppler on wheels, provided some historic tornado data. One member of the team recalls the moment the tornado ravaged Oklahoma's communities.
When we were near Moore and we were parked on the highway collecting data and debris was falling out of the sky, it was a very dramatic moment for us. We were seeing in real time these extremely high winds, over 300 miles an hour. Literally, we had evidence raining down on us of the destruction that was occurring really half a mile, perhaps a mile away. And that was very dramatic.
Well, there was a Weather Channel crew with them capturing that dramatic video that evening. And you can log on to weather.com right now and talk to Simon Temperton, a field producer who was there witnessing the destruction as it was going on. Weather.com, you can chat with him live right now. Well, of course, that was a dramatic night, and nothing was more dramatic than what was going on at Moore's 911 Center. Well, that's where Mike Seidel is right now. Mike?
And Nick, tonight compared to a year ago at this time, it is very, very quiet. A few emergency phone calls coming in. We just got one in, possible heart attack. But compared to a year ago, it is much quieter. Let's talk some numbers. Moore is a suburb of Oklahoma City. 45,000 people live in the city of Moore, south of Oklahoma City. On the night of May 3rd, about 5,000 homes and apartments were damaged or destroyed by that tornado. Now try to imagine being a policeman or fireman on that day here in Moore, absolutely overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster.
Go ahead, Adam 170.
The tornado is still on the ground just south of 149th at I-44 and it's heading your way.
Amazing how much this takes. Oh boy, this is not good.
Go ahead, Adam 170.
This house is still on the ground and it is large.
It's on the radio. We have a tornado in Moore. Hold your traffic unless emergency, please.
We have massive damage. Massive damage at the north end of town. We need a lot of help out here.
Go ahead.
Be advised, District 4 is leveled and should use some assistance. The whole west end of town is completely wiped out. We've got people hurt all over the place.
More 911.
It's my sister. She has a puncture to the lung. Her arms broke, her head broke, her legs broke. I think her neck broke.
How many people do you think are hurt? There's over 100 people, I swear. These are people's homes. There's nothing.
Calling everybody, every available unit, call them in. 433 to 402. Go ahead. I'm trying to get over there. My house was in the center, right in the dead center, but I'm going to try to get by there and see what's going on before I can make it into work. 433, take care of your family first.
Dispatch, go ahead, sir.
I'm going to be kind of in a problem right now. My whole thing, everything we've got over here has been wiped out. My whole block is completely gone. I don't know how many people's hurt or dead.
Dispatch is clear.
Boy, just watching and listening to that here in the Moore 911 Center, it sent chills up my spine. Quite a day 1 year ago today. Much quieter tonight here at the 911 Center, and much quieter at Channel 9, KWTV, where Kristen Dodd is standing by right now. Kristen?
That's right. I'm here in the weather office at KWTV, which actually was the frontline defense in the coverage of the May 3rd tornadoes. Now, coming up in the next half hour, we're going to hear further stories from this weather office and from the newsroom, including a story of a photographer who was struck by lightning while videotaping the storm. You'll also see his exclusive video. Now, let's go back to Terry Smith in the studio.
Well, that was 1 year ago. Tonight, thunderstorms have your attention, and here's Paul with the latest.
The intensity of the lightning, and I looked at my fingertips, and there were blue sparks coming out of my fingers.
He has permanent tremors as a result. The storm had an emotional impact on photographer Mark Dawson.
And when we got there, we saw some people crawling down from underneath the bridge, and broken legs, and everybody was just kind of stunned. And that's when I ran into the little boy, and he's looking for his mother. She couldn't get under the underpass into the little area, and so she draped herself around him and told him that she loved him and she couldn't hold on anymore, and then she was just gone.
Mark soon found her body in a nearby field.
Sad. A mother's love, she gave her life for her son, and to be there after that happened, incredible moment.
Definitely incredible moment. As a mother myself, it's hard to even listen to that story. Now, part of Mark's ability to go on after that story and after that occurrence was the fact that he was able to interview the boy a few days later and actually help convince the station to get the boy legal help and reunite him with some relatives. Now, with more on the May 3rd tornadoes, let's go to Kim Perez at the National Weather Service.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Well, for Oklahoma's National Weather Service, the May 3rd tornado was a challenge, both professionally and personally.
It is a strange feeling. Often we hear people say, well, I didn't think it would happen to me, and even our own experience in the forecast office that evening suggested maybe we fell into that sentiment at times, like, even though we have a job to do, this may be happening to us and our families, and what are we going to do? And we had to, deal with that at the same time. And that was a challenge.
And join me live throughout the night, and I'll continue to bring you updates on the events that took place 1 year ago. But now let's head to Highland Park with Nick Walker, a neighborhood that was hit hard by the tornado. Nick?
That's right, Tim, and we've been talking to a lot of survivors of that tornado that happened that night. We'll have their story a little bit later. But this is one of the survivors, too. This is Scooter. Now, her owners thought that she had been lost, but 2 days after the tornado, she was found underneath a pile of rubble and pretty much none the worse for wear. Way to go, Scoot. Well, of course, scientists will be studying this tornado for years to come. One of those groups of scientists is the Doppler on Wheels team from Oklahoma, the University of Oklahoma. Will be coming up next, share their up-close and personal experience with nature's fury. That coming up a little bit later. Right now, let's go back to the studio with Bob Child. Bob?
Thanks, Nick. Or tornado, but at this time last year that we were well into this incredible tornado outbreak. Let's go ahead and take you back there. 6 tornadoes touching down in Oklahoma in the last half hour. The bright red color on this radar shows the supercell storms that are producing the tornadoes and will continue to produce them throughout the evening. Moore in Cleveland County got hit hard by the F5 tornadoes around the city at 7:25 Central Time. The tornado entered Oklahoma County at 7:30, hitting Del City, leaving a 7-mile path of F4 damage. The supercell spawned another tornado a minute later, which touched down near Midwest City. The Oklahoma City tornado then makes its way toward Tinker Air Force Base, where it hits at 7:34. And the first tornado in Kansas actually hits as well at 7:35 near Mayfield, leaving a 12-mile F1 damage path as well. Well, folks, we talk a lot about the Doppler on Wheels team and the jobs that they do going out and chasing these storms. Would you believe they got as close to as 1 mile from the F5 tornado?
Just after 7, the Doppler on Wheels trucks were extremely close to the tornado.
Got debris falling.
Okay, slow down, slow down.
This is where we make it a flat. Yeah, boy, that thing's still rotating big time.
Yeah, insulation.
Looks like it may be over the road. Look at the tornado.
man, now it's visible.
1.4 kilometers ahead of us. Be careful here. If you feel like it's coming towards us or doing anything stupid, stop and do a U-turn.
And we followed it up to 37, and that was at the point where it went from being fun and exciting to being sobering, realizing that people were going to die, people's homes were going to be destroyed. So that was when the whole kind of the theme of the chase changed.
The tornado was just minutes in front of them.
We have power lines kind of hanging.
We're in the damage path right now.
Look at the houses.
Yeah, houses.
All the roofs are stripped.
It was heading towards neighborhoods we knew, we drove through. We knew people who lived in those neighborhoods. And as parts of those neighborhoods rained down on us, it was, I think, quite disturbing for some of us.
The chase took them through Moore, then north and east of Oklahoma City. By 8, they were close to I-40 as the 90-minute destructive tornado dissipated.
That's all that's left of it.
And as dangerous as that looks, folks, believe it or not, we get some incredible data from the work that those folks do. Dr. John Scala joins us now, our Weather Channel storm analyst. John, any preliminary results on that data?
Jim, there's been some exciting research done here. The Doppler radar that we're all familiar with looking at is about a 1.5 mile resolution. The information that we're getting from Josh's Doppler on wheels and Dr. Bluestein's even finer resolution is we're going down to where we can see the eye of a tornado and even vortices within the eye of the tornado. Tremendous information.
And it is those vortices that potentially cause most of the destruction. Thank you very much, Dr. John Scala. Again, folks, a busy night at this time 1 year ago, not only here at the Storm Prediction Center, but also at the 911 Center and more. And that's where Mike Seidel is with a live report. Mike?
Jim, tonight we've moved outside here in the town of Moore, and 1 year ago right now, sirens were going off. The emergency vehicles were zipping around the area of Moore where the F4 and the F5 struck. Here and over in the southwest part of Oklahoma City, that's where the F5 struck. It was a very dark day for Oklahoma residents, especially here in Oklahoma City. But amid the piles of rubble, hope emerged. Even a few days after the twister struck, several people were still missing. And in a dramatic rescue, crews found something totally unexpected.
I reached under the debris and pulled the baby out. When I did, the baby started crying, and I figured then that we were going to be okay.
And stay tuned to the Weather Channel. Coming up, we'll have more on these dramatic rescues. That's next half hour here on Weather Center as we remember May 3rd, 1999. Bob?
All right, thank you, Mike. Area, and we're going to check in now with Kim Perez at the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma. Kim?
And Bob, if you've been watching today, we've been bringing you a time lapse of events that have occurred 1 year ago on that deadly day. And in the last half hour a year ago, 9 tornadoes have touched down in Oklahoma and in Kansas, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. The Oklahoma City tornado didn't lift until 7:50 Central Time. The 12th tornado of that same family hit near Choctaw in Oklahoma County at 7:53. It went 7 miles as an F2. Now the 13th tornado of that same Oklahoma City supercell touched down near Jones in Oklahoma County at 8:09, leaving a 2-mile path of damage. And the tornado that hit Wichita actually touched down in Sumner County, Kansas at 8:13, leaving a 10-mile F1 path near Wellington. Well, the tornado that struck Oklahoma City was on the ground for over 80 minutes. This picture shows you the damage path, which was 14 miles long in the metro Oklahoma City area. At times, the path was up to a mile wide. The tornado ripped through several neighborhoods, city business districts, and crossed a major highway. Now, these aerial shots show the magnitude of the devastation wreaked by the May 3rd tornado. The twister turned towns into war zones. It leveled entire neighborhoods and left hundreds of residents homeless. Thousands of homes and buildings were damaged or demolished. Almost 10,000 vehicles turned into scrap metal. It was the costliest tornado in history. Damage estimates were put at more than $1 billion. 44 people were killed and hundreds were severely injured. Because of improved forecasting, though, the costliest tornado was fortunately not the deadliest. As a matter of fact, some of the folks we have to thank are right here at the National Weather Service office. If it wasn't for the advanced warnings and for Doppler radar, the same tornado could have killed 700 people. All right. Now let's go to Moore, the 911 center, with Mike Seidel with an update. Mike.
And Kim, a very quiet night tonight and more. Skies are clear, the birds are chirping, a far cry from 1 year ago this evening. I'm here at the 911 center where emergency managers work. Police and fire are right around the corner. You know, many days, most of the time, we take police and fire and emergency workers for granted. But they put their lives on the line for us almost every day of the year. But when an F5 tornado hits, the magnitude of the one that hit here last year and did the devastation, even that can put those folks in trouble. Rescuers are trained for emergencies.
We got 2 hurt, we got 1 missing.
But what no one can plan for is the chaos that an F5 tornado leaves behind.
There was just confusion everywhere. There were walking wounded everywhere. There were massive traffic tie-ups. You couldn't get anywhere. Actually, I parked right here, and I started walking down this street. The houses were leveled. The street signs were blown over. You really didn't know where you were.
Out of chaos comes order, sometimes right on the spot.
No smoking!
The small community of Bridge Creek turned their school campus into an emergency center.
The school became a mini city for lack of anything else.
And in the rubble of Bridge Creek, a tiny miracle.
Stopped, looked. Under some debris around the base of a tree, I seen what appeared to be a baby. It looked to me like a rag doll.
I haven't been back over here in many months.
Some rescuers were also victims.
But when I got to my street, and I knew it was my street, and I turned the corner, there was nothing standing anywhere. My house was completely wiped out.
It brings a lump in my throat, you know, to think about it. Yeah, when you think of all the people that were hurt, you know, and lost everything.
And one of those neighborhoods where they lost almost everything, some of the residents in Highland Park are recovering, even as we speak, a year ago tonight. And over in Highland Park this evening is the Weather Channel's Nick Walker. Nick?
That's right, Mike, and what a great night it is here. A beautiful evening, a great night for a block party, and that's exactly what the Highland Park residents are doing, having a block party for themselves. The people I talked with here say that they wanted to remember the storm and also to remember how they helped one another in the aftermath. They also invited the emergency personnel who helped with the rescue efforts that night. They wanted to thank them. Now, the folks said that it was important that they were here tonight to express their thanks that even with all the damage, there was not even one single fatality. Well, coming up in the next half hour, we'll talk with Oklahoma's governor about all that's happened since the tornado and also explain why an overpass is not a good place to be when a tornado strikes. Now let's go back to the studio with Bob Child. Bob?
Thanks, Nick.
But when we return, what goes on behind the scenes to keep you safe during a tornado?
Meet the people taking on that very tough task. Stay with us.
Walker, who was live in the Highland Park